little behind-the-scenes action for you there, Laowinners.
Yep.
That's how we set up a shot.
Cheers. Well, before we say anything, I have to apologize for our appearance. We weren't planning on filming today. And why
No, you don't need to know why. You don't need to know.
why
Anyway,
is that? Why are we here for the second time?
How do I say this?
Because we filmed this already. We've already done this entire episode. And why do we have to do it again?
Well, I'm going to cut to a clip here. You'll see that we have already filmed this, but unfortunately the audio was not good enough because I didn't copy the audio files off of the microphone that you see here.
I've never been to America, really. I actually haven't. But hearing people like Americans talking about the prices that pay for things, it's...
So we're back in the same place, and we're going to do the same exact
Trying to be
video.
professional, trying to make good content for YouTube, and this guy's been dropping the ball since day one.
Well, a lot of people ask, and I'm going to say it's probably the most common question I get
Yeah.
on YouTube, is China cheap, and how much am I going to have to earn, and how much can I spend comfortably if
And
I take a
save.
job here, and save as well, right?
Yeah. Rule number one, before we get into it, is that if you're going to buy a product that has been imported from outside China, it's going to cost more money than something produced inside China. So one of the biggest advantages about living in China is the food. It's cheap and it's good. So surprisingly, the people will find that it's actually cheaper to eat out at restaurants than it is to cook at home. The reason is that now that Chinese people are making more money, they're able to go out and enjoy food at restaurants. Labor is cheap, produce is cheap, and the food is really good. I mean, Chinese people can cook a lot better than I can.
The reason it's cheaper, to be honest, is that if you're a Westerner here, you're probably not going to be cooking basic Chinese food, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
the stuff
maybe.
that you have to go out and buy, like the ingredients you need for recipes, are definitely going to be more expensive than a Chinese restaurant, that's for sure.
Yeah, totally. I guess a little advice, if you do want to save money on food costs, get a roommate, because if you are cooking at home, the reason why it's expensive for me, I'm single and I live by myself, is that you buy all this stuff and chances are you're going to be cooking for more than one person because no one buys ingredients for just one, right?
Sure. Now, I eat out a lot less nowadays because actually we ended up hiring a maid to help out with my wife because we just had a kid.
You have a baby, yeah.
I have a baby. So I wouldn't normally get a maid, right?
No.
But my wife doesn't have a whole lot of time to go out and buy ingredients. She's taking care of the kid, right? So the maid's cooking food for us, and every day we spend about 100 or 150 RMB. So let's say about $17 to $25 on produce to cook our meals for the day. So we live off about 20 something dollars a day for an entire family of 4 because she's eating with us as well. Mm-hmm. If you go out to a cheap restaurant here in China, I think you can go all the way. If you're just eating dumplings and maybe some vegetables, you can pay $1.50.
Yeah, what's in America, because your prices are a little bit different than the rest of the world, how much does like an average dinner, not swanky, not cheap either, what's like an average meal that one person would spend?
$20.
20 bucks. If you spend 20 bucks here in China, you eat like a king. I'm talking
man.
beers, I'm
Yeah.
talking multiple different dishes, and no tipping in China.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
You don't have to tip in this country, and that saves a lot of money for consumers.
Sure, exactly. Now, since we're on the topic of food, I'm going to talk about drink as well, right? I mentioned
Yeah.
that whiskey. Now, alcohol here in China, the prices will astound you, especially for local alcohol. It is a drinker's paradise if you're not too picky about what you're drinking.
But like you said, it depends on what you want to be drinking, right? Chinese alcohol is extremely cheap. However, it's basically made in a bathtub. It's not always going to be that great. Western things like whiskey, vodka, gin, going to be a little bit more expensive.
Double to triple the cost depending on if you're from like a tax-heavy place that taxes alcohol.
Also, if we're going to cover red wine, very accessible. More expensive, but very accessible. White wine, on the other hand, you're going to have a little bit more of a harder time finding, especially good white wine.
Right, and it's very pricey even for the cheap stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just a little Laowinner tip out here, if you're not paying twice or 3 times as much the price for Western booze, you might be getting fake stuff. And it's estimated that between 60 and 70% of alcohol here in China that's imported from the West is actually counterfeit. So that's something you really have to worry for. Have you drank counterfeit booze before?
Absolutely.
So have I.
Unknowingly drank it. Well, you'll know, and you'll know quick that it's not real. But there's ways around that. If you take a look at the bottle, study it, don't be dumb, and you'll know when it's fake.
The tip, though, is if the price looks too good to be true here in China, then it probably is. Smoking is something that I gave up years ago, but it's difficult to do that. Why?
this is a smoking culture.
It's everywhere. You can smoke everywhere.
Less so these days, but it is still, it's almost every man smokes.
It is getting less and less popular with a younger crowd, but you'll still be offered cigarettes by older guys, and they expect you to smoke.
Yeah, if you don't smoke and you're at kind of a meeting or you really don't want to offend anyone, it's totally polite to accept a cigarette and put it in your pocket for later.
Or your ear.
Or
Actually,
your
that's
ear.
kind of low class. That is kind of low class.
It is low class, but I mean,
I did it all the time.
Yeah. I would say 5-6 years ago when you first came to China, it was impossible not to smoke.
People
It was
thought you were rude.
expected- Yeah, it was expected that if you're gonna sit and have drinks, you have a cigarette.
For sure, absolutely. Now, to get to the cost of cigarettes, it's really cheap. It's really, really cheap. You can go all the way down to 50 cents a pack and all the way up to spend ridiculous amounts. But your average pack of cigarettes costs between $1 and $2, and that's insane.
Yes.
It's insanely cheap.
Also, another little piece of advice: if you're able to somehow bring cigarettes from your home country and bring them to China and share with the people that you meet,
They'll be
they
happy.
Love that. That is an instant "we like you" ticket. It's Chinese people love it when they get to try Western
I
cigarettes.
do remember doing that in the past, and it did get a lot of favors done, that's
Yeah,
for sure.
don't do it if you don't smoke.
Sure.
Chinese people aren't expecting handouts,
Right.
but if you do smoke and if you can bring some cartons over, people love that.
A carton of cigarettes is a very acceptable gift here in China.
Yes.
So, Bros, you're a hardworking guy, huh?
I try.
You like to dabble in a little bit of nightlife after your work's over?
Well, yeah, it's the end of the week, and sometimes I like to go out, relax a little bit after working all day with the kids. So naturally, you're gonna go to bars.
Is that your preference of wetting your whistle? If you want to wet your whistle,
Yeah,
how
no,
do you do it?
I don't wet my whistle at bars usually. I'll go out from time to time, you know what I mean? I'll spend some time in bars. Normally, I'll actually hang out with you most of the time, and we'll go outside, get a plastic chair, a bottle of booze, and we'll sit and talk and eat. And that is cost efficient. It's cheaper, it's a lot of fun, you get more of the environment. However, if you're going to go to a bar, expect to pay out the ass, pardon the vulgarness, for the drinks. Beer is extremely expensive, especially if it's craft brew. It's a lot more money than you're going to pay in the West.
You can expect to pay at some of these bars for a craft beer up to $10 a glass. And that's not like a Manhattan bar. It's Manhattan prices, but it's not a Manhattan bar. You're paying Manhattan prices for a dingy dive bar that manages to have import craft beers, right? And that's completely different than when I first came. And I don't want to tell stories because that's boring, but when I first came here, one of the best things, I was a young buck back then, you know what I mean? I was a bit of a young buck, so I like to have, I like to wet my whistle as well. And I'd go out to the clubs and bars, and there were times where I'd spend 20 RMB, and that's like $5 for a night out.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't happen anymore. That buys you half a beer now, and you can't get half beers, by the way. So.
No. Also, going on from bars, if you want to go to clubs, don't even. A couple years ago.
This is a Laowinner tip.
Yeah, don't go to. No, go to clubs. They're
Go
fun
to
and
clubs.
everything, but. Years ago, you can get a giant bottle of booze for almost nothing, and now, I mean, I don't know. With my current lifestyle and job, I couldn't afford going to the clubs.
Absolutely.
It's thousands of yuan for.
I could
for
go
a bottle.
club when I first came here. I could go clubbing every night. I'd pay like 50 RMB for a table of beer.
Yeah.
Back then it was that cheap, and nowadays, if you go to a club, don't buy booze. People might invite you to their tables to drink, depending on what city you're in. Not gonna happen in
sure.
Shanghai or Beijing, but
No.
if you go to like a third-tier city, you can expect that people will like call you over to drink. So yeah, Prazi actually mentioned a really good alternative, and it's something that I think a lot of foreigners find really quickly. Instead of going to bars, hanging out with the local people or your friends on the side of the road eating street food or restaurants that have tables outside and bringing your own alcohol, which is totally okay to do, by the way, in China. And it turns out to be a big money saver, and you get to see more stuff, to be honest.
I like it more personally, but a lot of people they like bars more, and that's fine.
Sure, but a lot of the foreigners that I've met, one of the favorite things about China, when they go home, they're like, I really miss just sitting on the side of the road, eating some sticks of meat with my friends and drinking some beer. You know?
Yeah, exactly. I'm from Canada, and you can't
We don't do
drink
that.
anywhere. You have to
In
drink
public.
in your own home. You can drink in a bar, and then it's very restrictive. But
Sure.
China,
Well,
it's very
here's
loose.
the drinking in this tiny little room.
Yeah.
No one can see us here
Yeah.
while we imbibe.
This has become our little spot. We
I love
love
this
this
place.
little Japanese place. It's awesome.